It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Dr. Kapil Parakh. Hello, Dr. Parakh. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Let's see. Where do you want to start? You want to start with Dr. Fauci? Or you want to start with your book or what? Basically, we're going to talk about, it looks like finding information online. Actually, here's something I'll start with. A lot of information on people's health issues and things is now available online. And I had a funny conversation with my mother, who is 86 years old and in pretty good health, but she doesn't do the computer very well, and she got very upset when she called to make an appointment with her doctor about something, and they told her to go look online for the information. Sure. And she said, and she got very angry, and she called me and she said, "That's not my job. It's the doctor's job to figure out what's wrong with me. That's what I'm paying him for." So I just said, "Yeah, I know." So what do you do with that? I mean, because a lot of it is online now, and medical industry has pushed people to look up stuff for themselves, like DIY doctoring, which I don't know if it's such a good idea or not. What is your take on that?
That's a great question. And, what your mom describes is kind of the traditional model where, sort of the doctor was responsible for essentially figuring out what was wrong with the patient and taking care of them. Now what happens more often than not is, most people, when they have symptoms, they'll go online to look them up. And it's primarily because of convenience, when you're just a few clicks away, whereas it can take days, sometimes weeks to get in to see a doctor. So it's understandable that people go online to look up this information. And you're right, it doesn't always come with the best results. And I think that's kind of the gap the book hopes to fill, which is, on the one hand, you have people who are looking up information primarily because they're concerned about their health. They're engaged in their health and they want to be proactive, but their efforts don't always lead to success. And I think the challenge isn't that most people don't understand the difference between a blog and the Mayo Clinic. It's more the frameworks and kind of the approach that doctors and the health system uses is a new one compared to what a traditional search is. And if I may, I can sort of explain what that means, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you think about it, if you're searching for a restaurant, you're looking for one restaurant, and so you type in a few keywords and narrow in on one place to eat. Whereas if you have a symptom and you narrow in on one possible diagnosis, that's not the way most doctors approach symptoms. What we think of when we see a symptom is what we call a differential diagnosis. It's a group of options, and you try and work through that list of options to figure out, what the next steps are and what decisions to make. And for many people, that whole concept is foreign to them. So what we try to do in the book is, one, use anecdotes to draw people in and sort of help them empathize with the journey, but then explain the thinking that doctors have and then finally provide practical tools that they can use to actually implement this stuff.
Well, I know because of COVID that, and this started actually before COVID, where doctors were now sort of going online doing Zoom calls for consultations, which I think overall is a good idea. But there are certain things that you can't do on a Zoom call, that you actually have to see the patient and touch them and look at them and take tests, things like that. I mean, how has this helped you as a doctor? Is it freeing up more time? Are you able to see more patients?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So I think I can address it from both sides. So from the patient journey that we were talking about, I think once you, let's say you have a better frame of a differential of what to work through, and you're now concerned enough about something that's on that list of possibilities that you want to talk to somebody, and this is something we cover in the book as well, what's your next step? And, the options are everything from going to see a doctor in person to telemedicine, as you described, also like triage lines that insurance companies and doctors' offices have, et cetera. And so what we try to do is lay out those options for people so that they can get to, a resolution of their concerns sort of more quickly. And so I think that's one of the things that telemedicine has done. I think with COVID, we've seen an adoption of telemedicine that is accelerated in the last year more than we've seen in the last, decade. And what that allows for is for more options for people. I think from a provider perspective, as somebody in technology, I had long seen the promise of telemedicine and had been enthusiastic about it. But I think what it's done for a lot of my colleagues is it's sort of almost forced them to try it out. And once you try it out, even seasoned physicians who have been practicing for decades, I've heard from them who've been quite surprised by things like the convenience of it, being able to, finish up with one patient, go to the next relatively quickly with a click of a button, being able to reach their patients where they are, learn new things about their patients because you see stuff in the background about their homes and their life situations that you just had no idea about.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of pluses to it. Definitely, connecting in person has its own advantages. You can examine a patient. But I do think there are advantages to telemedicine that we hadn't anticipated that are now coming more apparent as we use it more.
Well, that's a good point. I want to hit on a couple of your talking points because it's kind of relevant to what we were just talking about. Obviously, when people are starting to go online and look for things, if they have a pain here or there, or they have some kind of a skin rash coming up or whatever it is, you can't trust everything that's online. And
of course,
I think people who are not trained medically are going to look at something and they could probably misdiagnose themselves very easily. How do you warn people that the information online may not be correct at all, and to be careful to not to misdiagnose yourself and then go out and buy some over-the-counter medication that is completely wrong for what it is that that they may have?
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful sort of question and framing. The thing is, one of the key tenets of the book is, and we sort of drum this throughout, we have a drumbeat throughout the book, is collaborate with your doctor. Don't go try and do things on your own. Because, much as the internet is convenient and has tons of information, doctors have training and understand their patients personally in a context that you just can't find online. So I think that's like a key sort of point in the book. And then in terms of like how do you navigate that journey, we talk about, once you come to a diagnosis or what you think might be a diagnosis, confirm that with your doctor before acting on it. Confirm the key steps in that process. So for example, if you're concerned about something that's potentially dangerous, or then go to an urgent care and seek attention. And then in terms of the information itself, we talk about how, for example, the ends of websites, like if you go to a .gov or a .edu from a reputable institution, that's much more reliable. If you find information on blogs, you don't necessarily have to throw it all away, but you want to confirm that from a couple of sources, preferably a reliable source, before you completely commit to that, and then be particularly wary of information from sites that are trying to sell you something. So we try and frame all of those things in a way that people can use it in a meaningful way to make decisions.
Well, I'll give you a personal example real quick of something. I woke up, a couple of months ago, and I had this horrible pain in the joint of my big toe. And immediately I thought, oh, it's gout, right? And it was very painful. It was very difficult to walk. So I went online, I looked up gout, and one of the things, they had, listings of some medications that you could get, but you'd have to go to the doctor and get a prescription. But one of the things that it said that you could do that may relieve the symptoms was to drink lots of cranberry juice. And I thought, Okay, well, I can get that at the supermarket. So I went and I bought a gallon of cranberry juice, and I drank, 3 or 4 glasses during the day and the next day, and by the third day the gout was gone, no pain in the foot at all. So I started looking it up, and there is some property in cranberry juice that relieves gout. Now, I'd never heard of that.
Okay.
Had you ever heard of that?
So I've not heard of that. To be fair, I'm a cardiologist.
Okay.
I still see patients, but that particular thing I've not heard of. I think in that anecdote, the things that, potentially could have helped you. First of all, I'm glad you're better, and I'm glad that it worked out for you. But, it's also possible that there are other causes of that toe pain, and it may not have been gout at all, right? And so...
that's true.
And so the thing... There are 2 key suggestions that we have over there. One is we also ask you to think about what else could it be. So going back to that, like finding a restaurant journey, typically because you're used to that search pattern of finding an answer for your question, you found an answer which you thought was gout, and then you start taking the next step of, okay, what do I do about it? Whereas what we do as physicians and what we recommend people to do in the book is when you get to that point where you think it's gout, stop for a second. Think, what else could it be? Go back and look at the other possibilities and come up with a little list of options. And then go discuss this with a doctor to say, which one of these things could it be? And, I'll just give you sort of the armchair version. Again, I'm a cardiologist, not a rheumatologist, but your toe joint could have been inflamed from strain, like maybe, if the way the shoes were on or something like that. Hard to tell, but like there are many other causes of that kind of inflamed toe joint. And so one is if the diagnosis was confirmed that it was gout, then they may want to put you on medicines to prevent it down the road. And then 2, if it wasn't, then they could tell you what it was and sort of help you along that way. So I think the risk there, and with telemedicine, you could have potentially reached somebody quite quickly. I think the risk with sort of doing all of this on your own is if it works out, that's wonderful and happy for you. But if it doesn't, and like there's a diagnosis that's missed, we describe a patient like this in the book, then you could actually have a delay to diagnosis, which could be quite dangerous in some cases.
Well, that's true. And if it had gotten worse or hadn't gone away, I certainly would have contacted my doctor. But on the other hand, I don't think there was any real damage to drinking a gallon of cranberry juice. I don't think there's any risk of serious health risk for that.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where you could do both, right? You could talk to somebody while you're trying to cranberry juice. And that's the kind of thing we recommend is like, if you want to try complementary and alternative medicines, that's great. Just keep touching base with your doctor and being in touch with the health system.
Let me ask you a little something about telemedicine, because I've never actually done it. I've never tried it. Is it cheaper? Is the charge for that less? Because I know to go into the doctor is $200, $250 for just to see him.
So the short version of that is it depends. The longer version is, so right now there's a variety of laws that have been passed through because of a public health emergency that allow exceptions. So the exceptions are that, before telemedicine was regulated at the state level, and now there's a federal sort of exception across the country to allow for telemedicine and to allow for doctors to charge as the same as if it were an in-person visit. And the coverage then, therefore, like the cost of it to the patient will depend on the insurance, like your deductible and those kinds of things. There are also some telemedicine providers and services that will provide discounted visits, either like for the first visit or as part of a promotion or things like that. So it can be quite variable. But the short answer is right this second, it tends to be on par with in-person visits with some opportunities for like discounts.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. I think in the future it should be cheaper. It just makes sense that it would be cheaper because there's less time involved. If doctors could do consultations exclusively online, you would no need for an office anymore.
Potentially. I think there's a possibility of that. I think it'll depend on the types of things. So when I see, I do some telemedicine and I see like a complicated patient that has, for example, like an inflamed heart and they have multiple things going on. it often takes me longer to figure out what's going on with them because there's a lot of different systems I have to check, and sometimes I'll have to call them back and forth. So it's a little bit of that, but I do think like for common things, for sure, like you could be quite efficient in triaging symptoms, and so there might even be like telemedicine triage services the same way you have triage phone line, where the main job is to just say, is this serious? Is it, cranberry juice and you'll be fine, or going to the doctor today kind of situation?
I don't know if we're at the point yet technologically where people could actually send you their vital signs live online. Are we there? Because I remember there was a show in the 70s where they used to transmit an EKG over the phone from the emergency response people right to the hospital. And so that technology has been around for a long time. But I don't know if there's something I can buy that I can hook up the little things and send you an EKG as we're talking. Is that anything that's available yet?
Yeah, no, the short answer is there's actually several sort of options in that arena. And, a bunch of smartwatches. So, for example, the Fitbit Sense, Apple Watch, Samsung's watches all can capture EKG that you can send as a PDF to a doctor. It's typically a single lead EKG. There's a company that's called AliveCore that sends out these strips that can capture actually a 6-lead or multi-lead EKG.
Oh, wow.
So that is available. And I think that's going to become sort of more common. I think the situation as it stands right now is most of those are what we call consumer grade. And the EKG is medical grade, but the heart rate and other vital signs are typically for example, from a watch or a phone, or consumer grade. And so we haven't gotten to the point yet where you could do that for a medical visit, but I think it is coming in the future. So that's definitely one of those things where sort of stay tuned. It's evolving pretty fast. We
do have to kind of wrap this up. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Absolutely. So I'd encourage people to check out searchingforhealth.org. It's all one word. And we have free resources there as well as links to the book.
Okay. How long has your book been out?
Just a week. So this is quite literally hot off the press.
Oh, great. How's it doing so far? Do you know?
We've had some wonderful feedback, some really nice reviews on Amazon, and then personal stories of people who found it helpful in their health journey, which I think to me is the most encouraging part.
Well, Doctor, thanks so much for taking time and coming and sharing. Best of luck with your book and your practice and everything you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on The Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to The Douglas Coleman Show, Ron Williams. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing just wonderful. How about yourself, man?
Oh, doing fine, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I got to tell you that you're the first bodybuilder that I've ever had on the show, so congratulations. We've done over 600 interviews, and I've never had a bodybuilder. I just had a professional wrestler on last week, and that was the first too.
Well, that's a big privilege for me, man. Thanks for having me on.
So I got to ask you first off, can I ask your age right now?
Right now, I keep getting it wrong. It's 59.
59. Oh, you and I are the same age. Exactly the same age. You were born 1962, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What month? Now I'm curious.
February. I was born in February.
February. You're 3 months older than me, man. My birthday's next month. Yeah.
You know what that means? You know what that means? You have to respect your elders, man. That's what they taught me.
I do. I have to bow. I got to bow to you. Okay. All right. No problem. Cool. Well, I'm glad we're the same age, because then we can, you know what it is? It's the pop culture. We kind of grew up listening to the same music. We had the same TV shows. You know, it's easier. When I get people on that are like 18, 19, 20, I have a hard time because I don't watch the same stuff. I don't listen to the same stuff with them.
Yeah, you have a hard time, but I have a hard time for a different reason, man. It's all the bites of information that they're so used to now, and everybody on Google is a professional now. So that's what I struggle with.
Well, yeah, and also I think the attention span, the younger you get, the shorter it gets. And, you know, we've been kind of cutting our show down a little bit because we found on YouTube and other platforms that people just weren't going to listen to the show if it was an hour long. So, you know, we kept cutting it down, and we got it to about 15 or 20 minutes now. And that seems to be the sweet spot where people will actually listen to most of the show. Well, anyways, let's talk a little bit about you. Your bio is very interesting. Let me just cover, you've got a couple talking points here that I want to cover. And you started out in the ghetto in Indianapolis. So I'm guessing this would have been in the late 60s, early 70s, yeah? In that time frame?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it says place of abandonment, physical, mental, sexual abuse. Man, you must have had a rough childhood, yeah? Do you want to talk anything about that?
Sure. I mean, if you know, everything is open, man. I'm an open, closed book, so there's no question you can ask that I'm not willing to talk about.
All right. Well, why don't you just tell us what happened? I mean, you grew up. It says abandonment. Did you grow up without any family, or did you have one parent in your family, or who raised you, basically?
Well, what happened? Well, actually, I was on the streets by the time I was 15, man. I was dropped off at a babysitter's house when I was 3 years old, and the babysitter didn't want me. She had 8 boys of her own, man, and I made number 9, and I was the youngest. And then her husband died, and when her husband, she had never worked before in her life, and she started working, and I was just left home, you know, and without any care. And you know, I was, you know, abused as a kid, beaten, sexually abused, and just verbally abused. And, you know, when I played sports as a kid, but nobody ever come to watch me play. So, you know, it was kind of a struggle. I was suicidal, man, by the time I was 13 years old. I just didn't want it anymore. And suicide seemed like a way out because I struggled and had so much inner pain that I just didn't want to live anymore, man. And so that's the way I started. And I started playing sports when I was about maybe 13 years old. And I found out at that point that the world loved the winner. So I couldn't have a family. I remember I was in 7th grade, and I ran a track meet, and I took 2nd place. I thought that was, you know, pretty good. But the guy who won stood on one side of me. The guy who took 3rd stood on the other side. And grade school newspaper reporters came and asked me, "Hey, how did you do?" I said, "Man, I did so awesome." They said, "What place did you get?" I said, 2nd. And they said, "Who won?" And at that point, they turned and went to the guy who won, and they left me. So I seen on one side of me a family encouraging and congratulating the guy who took 3rd. I stood in the middle by myself, and on the other side was the reporters with the guy who won. So I said, I could never be the guy with the family, but I could be the guy that wins. So that was my quest, man, to be number 1.
What sport was that?
Say it again.
Oh, which sport? Which sport was that you came into?
Oh, that was track.
Oh, track.
I was running track. Yeah.
Okay. So from there, I mean, did you end up literally on the streets with nowhere to go? Were you homeless, or where did you go?
Well, I could probably go back to that household that I was in, but I had no real parenting. And I was on the streets. I was sleeping outside, sleeping in garages. I had a girlfriend. I remember sleeping over at her house, sleeping under beds of different people. Just no real supervision. I hated where I was at, man. And I ended up by 18. I stayed in school because I could play sports. And I wasn't very good in school because I was just trying to survive. Just trying to survive. And a lot of times I was hungry, man, didn't have any food and that kind of thing. In the home I was raised in, there was hardly any food there. We were hungry all the time anyway. So it was only a place to lay my head. And it was brutal. I mean, I slept with the guy that I slept with there. He peed on me at night. I mean, we would sleep in the bed and he would pee in the bed and I'd wake up soaking wet, and he would never admit that he did it. He would say things like, you did it, or it rained last night. I'm like, man, this is not rain. This is pee, So it was kind of tough. So I didn't want to sleep there anyway.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal. How old was he when he's still peeing in the bed anyways?
Yeah, he was, I was probably 10, 11. He had to have been 14 or 15.
Oh, God.
He was still peeing in the bed.
That's really old to be peeing in the bed. Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't get involved in drugs or gangs or anything like that?
No, I was a loner, man. I didn't want to be around people, first of all, and I guess that was a good thing because it kept me out of the gangs. And I was so angry. I fought all the time. I mean, I couldn't think of a day that I didn't fight. I mean, that's just what I did.
You mean fighting like fighting kids on the street, fighting like that?
Absolutely, yeah. And that became one of my sports that I competed in. I competed in boxing for the military once I turned 18.
What did you join, the Army?
Yeah, I was in the Army.
Okay. Yeah, that's not even on your bio, but that's all right. How was the Army?
Well, the Army was another thing. I mean, it really taught me things, man. I mean, it taught me discipline, taught me, to get up in the morning, taught me to make my bed. It taught me when to go to bed at night, taught me how to brush my teeth, man.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember ever. I may have had one, but I couldn't remember ever having a toothbrush until I was in the Army. And I realized that brushing your teeth is not an innate thing, but it's a learned skill. And communication is another one of those things. I couldn't communicate very well. It's also a learned skill that you learn in the home. So a lot of those things that come natural to most people, I had to learn, after 18 years old.
Did you find that when you got into the Army, and I've had other people on the show who grew up in similar situations to yours without a real secure family, and they felt like the best part of the Army was finally they had a family. That's how they felt. Did you feel the same way about the Army? That, okay, now I got somebody who's going to look after me, who's going to take care of me. Yeah, it's a lot of work, and I have responsibilities, but they're there for me.
Actually, I didn't, man. It was the opposite. Yeah, it was the opposite for me. One is I really didn't trust, nor did I like people. I really didn't like people because everybody around me, it seemed, caused me pain. So I had this mentality that I wasn't going to let you close to me. And one of the reasons why I started bodybuilding is I wanted to build this emphasis or this structure around myself, this armor around me, so that I would never be hurt again. It was a lot like Iron Man, where he has this hard exterior shell, but he's a human inside. Because I had so many wounds from my childhood, man, that I just wanted to be safe, and the only way I could do that is build this big, strong body around this really insecure little boy. Even though I had, I was of age, I was 18, 19, 20, 21, all the way up to 28, I was still this little kid inside that was hurt. So yeah, and people being around me, I just didn't like people, man, because people hurt you.
Well, that's true enough. No argument from me. I've got 2 dogs that I love to death, you know. All right, well, that was a good segue. Thanks, because I was trying to figure out how to segue into bodybuilding, and you just threw it right in there. So cool. Now we're there. So how did you get into it? I mean, did somebody take you and show you how to do this, or did you just start lifting weights and start doing it all on your own?
Well, I was so insecure. Everything about me was a big insecurity. And so being on the boxing team, my boxing coach told me, I was in Germany at the time. By the way, I was tricked in going to Germany and getting into the military. But my boxing coach said to me, you know, we had been running 13 miles a day, had my hands up in the air. I was on the Army swim team. I'm also a diver. But as I was running every day, and I was running track for the military and boxing for the military, I might do all 3 of those events in a weekend. So as I'm boxing, my coach looked at me and he said to me, have you ever thought about bodybuilding? And my insecurity spoke out and said, man, I haven't lost a fight yet. What are you talking about? I thought he was telling me you're washed up in boxing, you know. And he said, no. He said, your body just looks like you could really go out and do some damage in that sport. So I went about 200 miles from where I was stationed as a teenager, and I competed in a teenage competition, and I won. And I thought, my insecurity screams out again. Are you kidding me? They cheated for me, and they felt sorry for me, and they let me win. I couldn't tell that I was a decent bodybuilder until I saw the pictures, man.
So let me just back up for a second. So as a kid, were you in good shape? I mean, you weren't like a big fat kid or a real skinny kid or something. You had a pretty good body as a kid to start out with?
As far as I can remember back, I've had a 6-pack, even as a 7 and 8 years old. And these huge, my legs were big and my back was always developed. My weakest body part was probably my chest. Okay. And I started developing my chest. But genetically, I was inclined to do bodybuilding.
So you were all right that way, yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask you something about bodybuilding, because I know absolutely nothing about it other than the videos I've seen where you've got guys on the stage wearing their Speedo and a little number stuck on it, and they go up and they do various poses and things in front of the judges, right? And then the judges decide what are they looking for? I mean, what is it that differentiates one from the other? Because quite honestly, they all look pretty much the same to me. I know that's kind of ignorant sounding, but I don't get what they're looking for.
Well, one is the way the muscles are put together, the size of the muscle bellies, the muscle fiber, the way the muscles tie into the joints. Like, say, for instance, you can have a guy who has a real short bone with a long muscle and that looks more massive. You have a guy with a small waist, and, because some people, they're just born with bigger hips and a bigger waist, and there's nothing you can do to alter that. But if you're genetically gifted with small joints, long muscles, and you can grow those muscles, have a lot of muscle fiber there, it makes a pleasing to the eye appearance. Some people are just big. I mean, a lot of people, they take drugs and they can get bigger, but they can never get that aesthetic, pleasing look to the eye. Like nowadays in bodybuilding, I mean, they're taking so many drugs. These guys look like caricatures, man. I mean, they are huge. So they're looking for symmetry. They're looking for muscle mass. They're looking for aesthetics. They're looking for a balance in the body where the calves are balanced out with your quads, hips, abs. Everything has to be balanced. And the one who has the better balance, more muscle, and symmetrical, the likelihood that person's going to win if they're detailed.
Well, that helps out a lot. So it's aesthetics over strength. I mean, you guys don't have to lift weights or do any kind of competition like that, right?
No. You just have to look a certain way, but it requires most of your competitors, your great competitors, are really, really extremely strong. that's the way you build muscle. The stronger the muscle, the bigger the muscle is. The more weight that muscle can handle, the more you can force that muscle to grow.
Okay. What do you think about what Arnold looked like when he was 19, 20? Is that pretty much it?
No, there were some other bodybuilders after Arnold. Arnold was one of the first of the generation of the huge bodybuilders. But I really like Franco Columbu, who was a competitor with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I know that name, yeah.
Part of the reason why is we're the same height and we probably weighed the same thing, in competitive shape. But after those guys, man, they start turning into caricatures. But you had people like Ronnie Coleman that was his symmetry was crazy. You had Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler. Between the two, Jay Cutler wasn't really meant to be one of the better bodybuilders. He just became so massive and so huge, man. That's what made him competitive. But Ronnie Coleman had more of an aesthetic look about him, which made him, I think he was 7 or 8 time Mr. Olympia.
So on your bio, it says that you are a 21-time winner of the top natural bodybuilding titles. What are the natural bodybuilding titles?
Well, one is Natural Mr. Universe, Natural Mr. World, and Natural Mr. Olympia. I won those 7 times.
Wow. Now, natural meaning what? No drugs?
Drug-free, yeah.
Drug-free. Okay.
Yeah.
Do they test you?
Yes, man. They test you like crazy, and they've caught some people that were taking drugs, competing against natural bodybuilders, and they put them in the hall, not the Hall of Fame, but the Hall of Shame.
The Hall of Shame.
They can never compete. Yeah, they can never compete natural again.
So what is that? Is that just a pee test, a urine test?
Well, they do a urine test. Yes, that was mainly what they did with us, a urine test and a polygraph test, those 2.
Oh, wow. I didn't know about the polygraph.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They would have whatever that police force was in that particular area, they would have their top agents come in and do polygraph tests on us.
So what years were that you were actively competing in bodybuilding?
Well, here we go, man. I go way back. We start off at 1988 was the first one.
Okay.
And 2008 was when I retired, and they inducted me into the Hall of Fame.
Wow, congratulations for that. So
thanks, man.
So from 2008 to now, you wrote a book. What else have you been doing?
Well, I write books. We do. I invent exercise equipment. I do life coaching. The life coaching is really, really, to me, important. I'm also a pastor of a local church here in Salt Lake City, Utah. So we're busy, and I do a lot of speaking, man, around the country. Lots of speaking.
You do TED
Talks?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't done TED Talks yet, but I do lots of speaking for corporations, for churches, for youth groups, for colleges, that kind of thing.
And you're speaking inspirational speaking, like life coach type speaking, motivational speaker? Yeah? Okay.
Yes. Okay. Inspirational speaker. Yeah. That's what I really enjoy because I get the opportunity, with the life coaching, I get the opportunity to really use my background. I believe that I was born for this, man. There's some things, I help people decrease body fat, put on muscle mass. So we have programs and stuff like that, online programs. But I really get a chance to use my past to really help other people because I've gone through a lot of things that are devastating. And I deal with people that are hurting, and I can identify with them, very non-judgmental, but I can help them through some of their struggles. One of the things I did in the Army is I was a tactical wire specialist, which is actually a telephone man, and I did that for a while until I got on the Army team. And what tactical wiremen do, they're really telephone men, and we had to dig up the lines in the ground. They didn't have, what they have now. This was old fashioned. And so I had to troubleshoot the lines to find out where the breaks were. Sometimes there were 4 or 5 breaks. Sometimes it's 2 o'clock in the morning, below zero in Germany. And we just had to go out there and troubleshoot. So what I do now is I troubleshoot people's lives, find out why they're in the condition they're in. Because what I learned is this: if you deal with the surface of a problem, you'll never really come to a conclusion, one that's decent or one that really, really works. If a person is overweight and obese and you deal with just the excess body fat, but you don't deal with the reason why it's there, that body fat has a reason and the right to come back. So what we do is we go to the root of the problem, almost like a dandelion. You cut that dandelion down, it comes back next week. But you go to the root of the problem, you kill the root, then the flower itself goes away. That's what we practice, man.
Well, that's an interesting idea. If I had more time, I would get into that with you, because I'm overweight myself, and I have been struggling to get rid of the belly for a long time, and it just doesn't work no matter what I do. But maybe I'm just not trying hard enough. I do like my food, and it doesn't bother me is the problem. I don't mind being overweight because I see all my friends are too, and it just isn't. It's not like, I know it's a health issue too, but yeah, that's for another show. We do have to kind of wrap this up. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Well, Ron Williams, RonWilliamsMinistries.com is one website. Another one is Your Champion Body website, and IronChestmaster.com. That's where we, create equipment and that kind of thing. But I wanted to say this to you, that if you're in America and you're carrying more body fat than you should, it is not all your fault, man. There are reasons. There are more than 75 reasons why people carry extra body fat. And you got to find out the ones that belong to you. You find out those reasons and you reverse it, you'll get rid of that extra body fat.
Well, I think McDonald's is one reason. Absolutely.
Yeah, that would definitely be one of the reasons.
I'm doing my best to stay away from the Golden Arches, but every once in a while I just go right through that drive-through. It just happens. The car knows itself. It just goes all by itself. And I find myself
it's programmed.
There. Yeah. It's programmed to go right through and order the Big Mac and the fries and, Topic for another show. Ron, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. Very, very interesting and really nice meeting you. Best of luck with everything that you're doing.
Okay, buddy. I appreciate you, and thanks for having me on. I'd love to come back, so keep that in mind.
Oh, absolutely.